who are you, or what are you doing, or something. And I was like, chill out. And I just heard like a yell, and I just felt the pain.
Then what happened?
I freaked out. And I don't know.
Pay close attention to the man in this footage. At first glance, he appears lost, his eyes reflecting a strange mix of confusion and regret. His demeanor is unassuming, almost pitiful, someone you might pass on the street without a second thought. But beneath that exterior lies something far more sinister. This very man, seemingly overwhelmed by his own thoughts, would soon unleash a horror so unimaginable that it would forever be etched into the dark history of Knoxville.
I mean, it shook us to our core.
On December 6, 2004, police in Knox County listened to an anonymous 911 caller tell them about something very horrifying. He tells them there is a man covered in blood and that someone has just broken into his house. Little did authorities know that a single phone call would launch the most shocking investigation of their careers, one that required uncovering mysteries, all buried within an exceptionally twisted and confused mind. Born on August 26, 1983, in Lebanon, Virginia, USA, Johnia Berry lived with her mother and stepdad, Michael Berry. The relationship they shared was priceless, as Johnia saw Michael Berry as her biological father. Hence, she took up his name Berry. However, Johnia Berry was not only academically gifted, having earned a degree in psychology from East Tennessee State University, but she was also known for her deep compassion and desire to help others. Johnia was determined to pursue a career in counseling or social work, motivated by a genuine desire to improve people's lives. Because of her love and commitment, she worked with children at the Etsu Little Bucks Care Center. She was described by her friends and family as having a deep sense of empathy and an innate ability to connect with people. They treasured her greatly, and spending the majority of the time with her was always special. They admired the fact that their daughter had a bright future ahead of her, filled with a lot of possibilities. Planning her graduation and wedding, she was on top of the world, but then all of these were snatched away from her in a blink of an eye. It all began in the early mornings of December 6, 2004, around 4 precisely, when this 21-year-old graduate student, Johnia Berry, was brutally stabbed. She was on her bed having a sound sleep in her Knoxville apartment until she was awakened by this intruder who put a stop to her life. In some way, her screams woke up her roommate, Jason Imami. But as he left his bedroom to follow the location where the sounds had come from, he was also stabbed. Luckily, he was able to escape to a nearby convenience store to make the 911 call.
Knox County 911. There's a man that just walked in the store. He's heavily bloodied. Looks like he's been in a fight. Apparently somebody broke into his house. Can I talk to him, please? Sure. Now what happened?
We're both sleeping. I just felt somebody stab me right in my chest.
Somebody stabbed you?
And it beat my face. And that's the first thing I did, just get up and run.
Unfortunately, first responders met the 21-year-old Johnia at the front entrance of the apartment building. Covered in blood and fighting for her life, Johnia was unable to talk. She was rushed to the hospital as quickly as possible, but as soon as they got there, fate had a twisted turn for her, as she was declared dead. Shockingly, when an autopsy was later performed on her, the grim reality of her final moments came to light. She had been stabbed 26 agonizing times. Each wound told a story of unimaginable brutality, the sheer number revealing a level of rage and malice that was beyond comprehension. It wasn't just the violence of the act that was horrifying, but the cold, deliberate nature of it. The discovery sent shockwaves through everyone who knew her, shattering their already fragile sense of safety. It wasn't just murder, it was a frenzy of hatred, a monstrous act that left her loved ones grappling with not only their loss, but with the chilling realization that such evil could exist so close to home. Now, who could have possibly done this, and why? On the other hand, this was unbelievable to the detectives, and they were determined to make the monster behind this terrifying act pay dearly. However, this would lead them to an investigation that turned out to be unbelievably hard. Nevertheless, when detectives went through the apartment, they beheld a scene so gruesome they couldn't imagine the amount of damage caused to the victim. Could it be someone who knew Johnia? Or has she stepped on the wrong toe? Or was this a retribution mission? What could she have done to compel someone to end her life in such a horrible way? All of these questions remained in the minds of the investigators and her loved ones. Meanwhile, inside Johnia's apartment, there were traces of a struggle, but no evidence of a break-in, with blood splashed on each door leading to Johnia's room. This, however, shows that there was indeed a struggle for life. Several significant pieces of evidence were also discovered, including a bent bloody knife in the living room that is thought to be the murder weapon. A bloody footprint, believed to be left by the killer, was discovered in Imami's room. A blood trail led out of the apartment's back door. Detectives discovered that Johnia had knocked on several neighbors' doors in an unsuccessful search for assistance. She desperately sought assistance as she slowly passed through each neighbor's door, dying. But, regrettably, despite her best efforts to seek assistance, with her life rapidly declining, even her determination to live was insufficient to overcome the terrible wounds she had sustained, and no one came to her aid. Although no one was able to hear anything during the attack, an immediate neighbor also made a 911 call before the call Imami made that night and couldn't open his door. The call lasted approximately a minute, but the caller was too scared to come out and help with whatever was going on outside. However, he was concerned that going outside to help would be too dangerous. Investigators identified those close to Johnia as possible suspects. Her fiancé, Jason White, who was attending law school in Michigan, was removed from the list due to his absence during the murder. On second thought, police needed to investigate the 911 caller, Imami. Imami was friends with Johnia and had recently graduated with an accounting degree from Eastern Tennessee State University, where Johnia had previously studied. They knew each other well because he was dating one of Johnia's friends. She moved into his Knoxville apartment around 6 weeks before the murder. Right there, investigators recognized his instinct to leave. Investigators speculated that Imami could probably be having an affair with Johnia and did not want anyone to know about it, which could have led to him fleeing the scene. However, upon further examination, it is unclear why his wounds were less severe than Johnia's. Detectives wondered why the intruder had let him get away so easily. Nevertheless, 3 days after the murder, Johnia's loved ones gathered in somber grief to lay her to rest. The air was thick with sorrow. Each tear that fell carried the ache of a future forever changed. How could this have happened? How could someone so full of life be gone so suddenly? Shockingly, Imami was also present at the funeral. The sight of him there, standing among the grieving, stirred a mixture of anger, confusion, and suspicion in the hearts of those who loved Johnia. The whispers began. How could he stand there, seemingly unaffected, while Johnia lay cold in the ground? Why was he still alive, and she, so innocent, so full of promise, gone? For the detectives observing from the sidelines, Imami's attendants set off alarms. The question lingered, was this just grief, or was there something more sinister at play? Consequently, detectives thought that if Imami could attend the funeral, that goes out to say he was also strong enough for an interview. A day after the funeral, Imami sits down for an interview with detectives at the sheriff's office. Imami was asked by the detectives to take a polygraph test, and he consented.
Regarding the death of Johnia Berry, do you intend to answer truthfully each question about that? Yes. Do you know for sure who caused the death of Johnia Berry? Yes. Did you have prior knowledge that the person who stabbed Johnia would be at your apartment that night?
Surprisingly, according to the polygraph examiner, Imami failed the test. Believing that he had more to tell, detectives took him back to the crime scene. On arrival at the crime scene, Imami tells them that he came back from work at about 9 p.m. on the day of the murder, after working out at the gym.
I came and I sat down here to watch TV. I grabbed the controller to watch TV, and Jonna was still sitting here with her Christmas presents. I remember she was telling me who the present was for and who she bought it for.
And what those presents were for who?
Kids.
Interestingly, Imami appears to simply instruct detectives and is not even sad walking through the crime scene, as someone who just lost a friend.
He's right here.
And he is right there. And I'm still looking down, and I remember doing this and having him face me, grab me like this. And then he pushed me back this way, and I fell on the bed like this.
Hard shove
Yeah, it was a fairly hard shove. I remember hitting my head right here.
on the metal.
When detectives saw things weren't going well, they led Imami to the interrogation room, where he told police how it had all happened. He explained that when he opened his door, he saw the shadow of a male figure backing out of Johnia's bedroom and was helpless to do anything.
The whole area was just like this big, dark, black cloud had come over us for something. I mean, it shook us to our core.
After being stabbed, Imami seized the opportunity to flee. However, some of Imami's statements raised red flags. If Imami claims the flat was locked, how did the intruder get in? Did Imami hear Johnia scream, or was she silent as he fled? His stories were inconsistent, which sparked concerns. Another noteworthy feature that prompted detectives to wonder if Imami was the invader was his superficial cuts, which were not as deep as the wounds Johnia received. Most notably, the wound on his right finger seemed exceedingly suspicious. Did he stab Johnia, then slide his finger down the knife to cut it? Or did he actually sustain a defensive wound during the fight? Or could it be that he staged this whole act? Detectives pondered all of these questions. However, when the polygraph machine was ruled to be malfunctioning, police quickly discovered that he was telling the truth. Stacy Kaiser, a professional psychologist, stated that she believed Imami was shocked and perplexed by the incidents, but they still needed to figure out who murdered Johnia, and they needed to do so quickly. Investigators used Imami's account of his story to create a composite drawing of the killer, which gained a lot of attention. Flyers for Johnia were circulated across the city, turning every corner, street lamp, and bulletin board into a silent call for justice. Strategically, the flyers were placed in the busiest parts of town: the bustling downtown streets, the crowded shopping centers, the lively coffee shops, and the busy intersections where people couldn't help but stop and notice. The message was clear and urgent. Someone out there knew something, and the search for her killer was far from over. Her family and friends had poured their hopes into those pieces of paper, believing that someone, somewhere, held the key to finding the person responsible. Just then, someone notified detectives he knew who had killed Johnia. Investigators thought this was it, and they'd finally found closure on the case. Unfortunately, one person who popped up on the investigators' radar was a man with an existing warrant for his arrest on a previous charge. He lived less than 3 miles from the crime scene and was revealed to have a pair of shoes with tracks that matched the footprint found in Imami's room. It was 17 days after the murder, and the police were confident they had solved the crime. Coincidentally, when they began asking him about the homicide, he admitted his involvement and claimed it was drug-related. However, all of this would result in a false lead. Detectives discovered that the suspect merely enjoyed being the center of attention, and that he was not the murderer. They understood they most likely had someone suffering from a mental health issue. Months passed, and the case stalled. But thankfully, the results of the DNA testing on the blood recovered inside the flat, and the drops heading out the back door revealed new leads. Apparently, the blood on the bent knife belonged to Johnia, Imami, and an unknown man. It effectively supported Jason's claim that there had been an intruder. Imami was eventually ruled out as a potential suspect. Now, investigators had to track down the unknown male intruder. In any case, detectives checked the third person's DNA against a national database. Nonetheless, they discovered no match. Over the next few years, tips and leads trickled in, but none made any headway. Johnia's family had lost her, but now they were losing faith too. Faith in the system, in the goodness of people, in the hope that truth would prevail. But sadly, the case remained stagnant. They had done everything they could, yet the case remained cold, as if Johnia's life, and their pain, would never receive justice. Then, a major break came in April 2007. Someone driving by a billboard with the composite sketch on it called the police to say he recognized the suspect. He was a man in his early 20s whose name was Taylor Lee Olson. Meanwhile, Taylor Lee Olson was born into a life of privilege. His upbringing was marked by the comforts and privileges that come with a well-off family, allowing him access to opportunities that many could only dream of. Despite this, his life took a darker turn as he entered his late teens and early 20s. He was, however, often described as a restless spirit, someone who found it difficult to conform to the expectations placed upon him. Though he had the resources and support to succeed, he seemed drawn to the fringes of society, perhaps in search of excitement or a sense of belonging that he couldn't find in his structured, affluent environment. This led him down a path of petty crimes, ranging from theft to minor vandalism. While none of his actions were severe enough to land him in serious trouble, they painted a picture of a young man struggling to find his place in the world. However, they became more frequent, hinting at a pattern of behavior that was increasingly reckless. Taylor's record included charges for shoplifting, trespassing, and other petty crimes. He managed to avoid major legal consequences. Unfortunately, he has an outstanding warrant related to one of his past crimes, and investigators saw this as an opportunity to approach him, and he was taken to the interview room. Olson was interviewed, and he denied being involved in Johnia's death. He also consented to freely provide a DNA sample, which detectives concluded would be another dead end. But that was not the case.
Johnia Berry before or anything?
Like, in person?
Yeah.
No, I've never met her.
Have you been in her apartment?
Never.
You got your hand, your finger.
Right there, punch the light bulb.
In September 2007, detectives determined that Olson's DNA matched the third blood samples found on the knife.
Your blood being in Johnia Berry's apartment.
My blood was in Johnia Berry's apartment.
Right.
I've never killed anyone.
It's blood. Is what it is, blood.
Dude.
Olson, on the other hand, argued that cops had the wrong guy, but detectives refused to believe him and kept him, allowing him time to ponder on his actions and come clean. After a few days of interrogation, Olson finally cracked and agreed to tell them what had happened. What drove this man to kill Johnia, and in such a horrible manner? On that fatal day, December 4th, 2004, he claimed he was with a friend near Johnia's apartment, attempting to steal a car.
What do you remember about when you came in the back door? Do you remember anything?
It's all blurry, man.
Well, tell me what you remember. What happened to turn into this?
I didn't have a car. I was just checking doors, just trying to get a car.
His friend had left, but Olson continued the search. He planned to use a sensor to find keys and identify the car they were going with inside the apartment. As the night intensified and the world outside grew peaceful, sometime after midnight, Olson broke into their apartment. The sound of footsteps, the creak of a door, these were the first signs that something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sounds of struggle. Johnia, awakened by the intruder, found herself face to face with a man who had come with deadly intentions. In the darkness, chaos erupted. The attacker, armed with a knife, launched a brutal assault on Johnia. Although Johnia was terrified, she was determined to survive and fought back with every ounce of strength she had. But the attacker was relentless, his fury evident in the savage violence he inflicted on her. In those horrifying moments, Johnia suffered 26 stab wounds, each one a brutal testament to the rage and malice of her assailant, and that's when the murder occurred.
And someone said, "Who are you?" or "What are you doing?" or something. And I was like, chill out. And then I just heard like a yell, and I just felt the pain.
Then what happened?
I freaked out. And I don't know.
Olson, however, told detectives he got the knife from Johnia's house, and this made sense to them as they remembered what Imami told them about Johnia screaming from having a nightmare, so she probably wanted to protect herself with the knife. And if only she had known that same weapon would end up taking her life.
I got it away, and it didn't seem like I stabbed anybody. It seemed like a fight or something. And then I just ran.
Meanwhile, Olson Taylor's ability to evade justice for 3 long years after Johnia Berry's murder was a chilling testament to the cunning and deception he employed. In the days following the murder, Taylor made sure to keep a low profile. He moved frequently, never staying in one place for too long, and avoided interactions that might raise suspicion. Taylor also understood the power of silence. He spoke to no one about what he had done, not even to those he trusted most. The fear of exposure kept him isolated. For 3 agonizing years, Johnia's family and friends lived with the pain of not knowing who had taken her from them while Taylor continued his life, haunted but undetected. It wasn't until a stroke of luck, or perhaps a small mistake on Taylor's part, that the truth finally began to unravel. When he was eventually caught, it became clear just how close he had come to getting away with murder entirely. His capture brought relief to a grieving community, but also a chilling realization of how easily justice can be delayed when a killer is determined to remain hidden. On the other hand, Olson's mom, who couldn't believe her son would pull off such a stunt, was allowed by the detectives to see him before he was taken to the detention center to await trial.
Area was just like this big, dark, black cloud had come over us for something.
Meanwhile, Olson was charged with Johnia's murder and was escorted and transported to the detention facility to await trial. Sadly, Olson shows a lot of remorse for the actions he says he doesn't remember. 5 months before the trial, Olson couldn't take it anymore, and he hung himself in his cell. In an interview with Johnia's father, he calls Olson's action a coward's admission of guilt. And just like that, Johnia's life was stolen in a moment of senseless brutality, extinguished by a twisted and confused mind that saw no value in the bright future she had ahead of her. Her mother, in particular, felt the loss like a physical wound. The bond between them had been unbreakable, filled with shared dreams, laughter, and an unspoken understanding that only a mother and daughter can have. Johnia had been the light of her life, the person who could brighten even the darkest days with a simple smile or a kind word. And now, that light was gone, snuffed out in the cruelest way possible. Do you think Olson's self-inflicted death was an act of remorse or cowardice?